Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I'm delighted to be joined here by Seamus Brady from the Play On GAA podcast. We're going to be reviewing yesterday's All-Ireland Senior Football Championship, in which Kerry won their 38th All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. Massive congratulations to the Kingdom, as I was obviously saying yesterday. And we're here to break down that game. We might touch on Colm O'Rourke's appointment as Meath senior football manager, and maybe 5-10 minute chat maybe about Brian Cody's retirement potentially there as well, depending on how long we go on for. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by Declan Kirby GAA Star, the best children's GAA book out there in the market at the minute. So you can find it on Amazon, Easons, all good bookshops. So make sure to check that out when you get a chance. Shay, how's things with yourself as a fellow Dublin fan? Are you, I suppose, the same as me, seeing Kerry winning All Ireland? It's, it was a fun 8 years while it lasted, but unfortunately, I guess you could say maybe normal service has resumed.
Yeah, I think the 8 years that we just endured there are very much a rarity. The only time in the past really that it hasn't happened for Kerry is probably the late 80s into the early 90s. But yeah, no, it was always going to come once you saw the streak of back-to-back minor teams that Kerry had that were just pumping out these scary footballers. Like I do remember going to that Dublin Mayo game in 2017 and seeing the minor game before, and that was the game where David Clifford scored 4 goals in an All-Ireland minor final. And even then you knew, like my dad was saying to me back then, he was like, geez, that Clifford fella is a bit decent. And everyone knew that these lads were coming. And the thing that was always a bit scary is Dublin's dominance was built off the back of one minor All-Ireland title. We only won it in 2012. Kerry won 5 on the bounce. So these lads are always going to come through. And I mean, early on, we've chatted a lot on previous podcasts about, the likes of Paul O'Shea, Paul Walsh, these lads that came through, and they're not even getting a look into the Kerry senior team. That's the level of the talent that is there. And I think the breakthrough was always going to come, and it'll be interesting to see, or maybe a bit painful to see as a dub, how many they can go and win now from this.
Yeah, I mean, you could nearly make 2 teams of Kerry, really, couldn't you? I mean, maybe it's time to start having
Split
a conversation about splitting Kerry in 2, do you know that way? Like, but you really could have 2 Kerry teams. Like, you could have a side with Paul Walsh, Spillane, even like players like Joe O'Connor and Stefan Okumber, like not able to get a look into this Kerry side, which is very, very unusual. But I suppose in terms of the game,
maybe Paul Walsh will get Ronaldinho in there corner forward.
yeah, maybe. But to be fair, like I think Kerry already have enough quality. I think bringing in Ronaldinho would be quite something else. But in terms of the game itself, I mean, what were your thoughts on the game and how it panned out? I mean, it was look, I think a lot of people very much had Kerry as the favourites, and in the end, obviously Kerry did prevail and did get the job done. But I don't think a lot of people expected maybe Galway to be, I suppose, as good as they performed, to lead for about 50 minutes or so, and for Kerry to struggle in the first half. But look, in the end, Kerry got the job done. But I suppose, like, in a nutshell, what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I thought it was very, very interesting. I mean, sadly, I got my prediction was correct. I'm sure yours wasn't too far off either. I said Kerry by 4 points. I said that the last quarter would prove crucial, that their subs were better. We were talking about the benches and the lads that Kerry have to bring on. But still, in the back of your mind, you do look at the Kerry team and you think, God, like this Kerry team in the past, the way that they just breezed past Mayo, in 2 consecutive meetings with them, and how much Mayo ran Galway close in that Connacht game, and then how difficult it was for Galway over the last 3 years to beat Mayo. You're thinking, well, Kerry put Mayo to the sword with absolutely no problem at all. So you're thinking, will they be able to do the same to Galway? But Galway, like Luke was saying, that the amount of times now that we've seen Galway, particularly in the Armagh game, the Derry game as well, and then even in this final, Galway playing like a team that have been around the block for years. Like we were saying off air there, they're a very young team. Like a lot of these lads have only been drafted in, like Jack Lynn and the likes of, Matthew Tierney. This is their first real crack at an inter-county senior season, and they've made, the All-Ireland final. It's their first time that they haven't just played one game in Connacht and been knocked out. Like it's their first real time playing consistently in Croke Park, and they've done really, really, really well. For Kerry, I did think, look, the pressure of having to break through and the pressure of having all those people kind of watching would eventually kind of crack them at some point. But, and it looked like they were getting a bit worried at stages when you consider some of the misses, like Sean O'Shea's first free. I mean, you won't want to touch on that considering the free that he hit before was the one against Dublin, but that first free that he took was a stinker. Like that never looked like it was going over the bar. And he ended up not scoring a point from play. He didn't have his best game. The only man that stood up, and I've seen it in your title before we went on, which you can have a fair old debate about, that is David Clifford. He just, throughout the game, never, ever, ever let the occasion get to him. Never, ever let the pressure get to him. Like, he's on a billboard there advertising their after party, and he just doesn't even think for 1 second that this isn't going to happen for Kerry. Completely calm, completely composed, and just swung over key point after key point. And those 2 catches that he made for the marks were a pure captain's performance from Clifford. And like, that's why like, he's the best. I wouldn't say he's the best of all time yet, but he's definitely the best I've ever seen at that age. I've never seen someone as good as he is at 22, 23. Like,
Yeah.
Conor O'Callaghan was, again, a freak in terms of how good he was at 21, 22. But Clifford is, I think, better than Con was at that age. Like, he literally carried Kerry in that first half when Galway were getting the better of them. And that was the thing. They went in at half time, fairly close, even though Galway had been by far and away, in my opinion, the better team in that first half. And that's what, for me, is always a tell. How easy are you getting your scores? Kerry were working a lot of easy scores from marks, from frees. Galway's kicks were Shane Walsh booting it over from the sideline. Like, you can't keep doing that all game. So I think eventually Kerry's bench and their composure and their quality came through.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it was definitely going into that final quarter. Like, and I think, we've seen Dublin do that numerous times down the years. We've seen even Tyrone last year. Like, that's really the sort of period where the big teams come alive and win All Irelands and bring lads off the bench that can really make an impact. And I suppose, as you said there, like, as well, like in regards to David Clifford, like, plenty of discussion sort of going around on Twitter and social media about David Clifford being the greatest of all time. I seen Joe Brolly put out a tweet earlier, and he was saying, Clifford is the greatest of all time, and he very much carried Kerry towards that All Ireland. Like, I do think there was a lot of other very, very good players on show, but I think you could definitely say without Clifford on the field, they wouldn't have won the game. But I mean, what's your thoughts there? I mean, you were saying there, like, he's the best you've ever seen at 22, 23. And I'd agree as well. Like, I think he probably needs to add maybe, like, because if you're talking about the greatest of all time, you probably need to be adding 5, 6 All Irelands. Do you know what I mean? Like, to really, really get into that conversation. But look, at his age, like, that is a realistic possibility. And I think, much like Dublin trying to get the breakthrough in 2011, once you kind of get that first one, like, as long as you kind of keep the standards, keep the players there, keep the hunger and motivation, there's no reason why you can't go on and dominate and win more.
Yeah, but when you look at some of the players that Dublin have that have 8 All-Ireland medals, like the likes of, Philly McMahon, Michael Darmacaulay, like, who obviously amazing footballers, but I don't think they're as good as David Clifford is right now. Or that they definitely weren't as good as David Clifford was at 22, 23 years of age, and they finished up their career with 8 All-Ireland medals. Like, so it does speak to, like, well, what can David Clifford finish up with? I do think it is a jump to put him in the conversation for the greatest of all time right now. I mean, that would be kind of the equivalent of putting like a Kylian Mbappe or Erling Haaland in for the best footballer of all time. It's like, he's amazing, but he's a very young lad still. And, he won't, but he could next year decide, I'm packing up, I'm going to the AFL to go play over there for a few years. And then it's really hard to actually consider him as the greatest of all time. What we can say is he's one of the greatest talents that we've ever seen in Gaelic football, in terms of, because one thing that gets undermined a lot about David Clifford because of how skilled he is and because of how good he is the absolute size of him as well. Like, Kerry are able to pump high ball in on him. Clifford's 6'3", 6'4", like, he's massive bloke, like, and then he's filled out as well. It's clear he's been working out in the off season. So now he's more than capable of shrugging a few defenders off to get that yard of space. And we all know what happens when he gets that yard of space. He usually converts. It's one of those where he's like Henry Shefflin. Like, whenever you miss, you are like, whoa, what's going on there? Like, how has he missed that? And look, I do fully believe when it's all said and done, if he carries on playing at the level that he's playing, when it's all said and done, I think he will be the greatest of all time. He's the only one I can think of in Gaelic games that is as much of a phenomenon at that age that he is right now. It's Joe Canning in the hurling. He's the only one that I can kind of compare him to and say, like, Canning was from a minor. Everyone knew Canning was going to be the best hurler in Ireland, and everyone knew Clifford was going to be the best footballer in Ireland. And when you look at his first year with Kerry, like, he won an All-Star in his first season in the senior team when he was 18 years of age. Like, the pressure that he was coming into the senior team with, like, I don't think I've ever seen a footballer come in to a senior county side with the pressure that was on him that David Clifford had. And, you know, he's kept it pretty cool. He seems to be a pretty humble fella. He hasn't let it get to his head. He's just focusing on playing his football. I think he's the perfect man to handle it. And yeah, I believe he's not there yet, but I do definitely believe when it's all said and done, he'd be the GOAT.
Yeah, like, I mean, as you said there, like, I think, you know, skillful, you know, in terms of skills, in terms of his technical ability, I think we can all very much see that. Like, he's unbelievable on his left. He can kick on his right, obviously, as well. Like, he's 2-footed in many ways. You know, like, and he has improved his game quite a lot through the years, because I even remember that 2019 final, and, you know, like, he was 19, I think, in that age, and he probably hadn't quite filled out at that stage, but technically he was still brilliant. But you've seen him really, like, physically sort of come on in the last couple of years, and I think his mentality as well, like, is very good, because, like, you see him, like, with those celebrations, and even towards the end of the game, he was sort of like trying to, you know, get the crowd up on their feet. Like, I seen him with his hands kind of going like this to try to get them up on their feet as the final whistle's been blown. Like, I think he looks like a born winner, and now that he's finally got that All-Ireland, like, I mean, you know, like, who knows how many All-Irelands he could finish up with. As you said, you never know. He could go off and play AFL or whatever, but, you know, like, there's the future is very bright for Mr. Clifford anyways.
Yeah, it's from this point now, it's all about his mentality. From this point now, it's all about his mentality, all about what do you actually want? Does he want to go down as the greatest of all time? Because, I mean, the two of us are both, you know, obviously mixed martial arts fans, UFC fans. We see the difference between, say, a champion like McGregor was. When he won the belt, he was quite happy to be like, okay, job done, what's next? Whereas someone like a Kamaru Usman is like, no, I want to go down as the greatest of all time. Give me any challenge that is there. And I feel like Clifford is more of that mentality. He's more like, right, I've got one, I want 10. Like, that type of mentality. I want as many as I can get my hands on before I retire. I want it to be undisputed that when people look back on, I'm the greatest. Because, I mean, I don't think anybody's been in as good a position as David Clifford is in right now. He has an incredible team behind him. He has, like, the likes of Shawnee O'Shea, the likes of Paddy Clifford assisting him. He's getting quality service, quality ball into him all the time. And he has so many more young lads coming into that side that, you know, will let him take the frees as well off the left foot and everything like that. It's set up for him to be the absolute face of that team. And yeah, it's for me, it's all about his mentality. If he feels like he's reached the top of the mountain, then, as we've seen with countless sports figures in the past, when you reach that top of the mountain, you can kind of fall out of love with the game very quickly. Like, the likes of Tyson Fury, that when he became heavyweight champion, the job done. Like, what's left to do now? So it's all about what is Clifford's actual end goal here. If Clifford's end goal is to be the greatest of all time, then we're all in as Dublin fans. And if you're listening to this, if you're not a Kerry fan, we're all in for absolute hell, because Clifford is going to keep going until he wins however many All-Irelands that he can. But if he has his eye on other things, and maybe he's thinking, okay, I've won a few All-Irelands here, now I can go, it'll be just interesting. I think his mentality is going to play a huge part in how his legacy goes down. But definitely, he's already one of the most gifted footballers we've seen.
Yeah, like, and I think it's one of them things, even like where we even seen it with Dublin, like how Dublin almost, like, part of Dublin's downfall in some ways was nearly like they were victims of their own success, because, you know, a lot of players just started stepping away and retiring early because they'd nothing more to achieve. Like, they won 6 in a row.
And the fans, Aaron, like, I mean, me and you as fans, like, remember when Dublin actually looked like they weren't going to win Leinster? Like it drew more of a crowd. Like you go back to 2007, Dublin, Laois in a Leinster final in Croke Park at 84,000 people in the stadium to watch it. You would never see that now because we all know the result. We all know Dublin are going to win by 20 points. And that did, like Jack McCaffrey pretty much openly was just kind of like, yeah, I just got a bit bored like of winning All Ireland every single year. Like that's the type of thing that you're like, look, will that happen to Kerry? Who knows? It depends on their level of competition. I feel like Mayo played such a huge part in the Dublin success because Dublin weren't winning All Ireland's easy because of Mayo. And Mayo were the ones that were making them work for year on year. I think if the 5 in a row wasn't such a big thing, maybe Dublin would have lost a few more players before the drive for 5. But once they got that 5 in a row, the rate of which the lads dropped off was startling. So it'll be fascinating to see if a similar thing happens with Kerry, if there's anything different.
Yeah, Rory says here, I was kind of expecting Clifford to get Footballer of the Year. He is unbelievable. Yeah, I would think like he probably is going to win Footballer of the Year. He's certainly my front runner for Footballer of the Year at this moment in time. Would you agree with that, or would you be thinking of anyone else?
Yeah, definitely. I would have thought maybe going into the final, maybe Seanie O'Shea could be an outside bet, or if Galway won, Damien Comer. But Comer didn't have his greatest game in that final by any stretch of the imagination, and Clifford was the man. So yeah, for me, David Clifford.
Yeah, 100%. I think Shane Walsh is definitely in the conversation as well. To be fair, and we'll certainly discuss his performance a little bit later on. But Gavin says here, Kerry are on the rise, but there you go. In Armagh are also improving, and others might bounce back. So I'm not sure if Kerry will go on to win a few in a row like Dublin, but you never know. Like, yeah, I suppose it is a fair point. It's one of them things like where, like, I suppose with Dublin when they were dominant, like Mayo were sort of the main side. Kerry were sort of in that transition of the sort of side that won the All Ireland in 2014, and obviously this young team that we're obviously seeing right now, they were sort of in a bit of a transition around 2016, 2017, 18. Armagh clearly weren't the same team. Galway were in a bit of transition. So I suppose that is the thing for Kerry, is there probably is, you know, like, I don't know if they'll face as good as teams as maybe it's that Mayo team were in 16, 17, but it is going to be tough, you know, like the winning All Irelands year on year, because as you said, like Dublin are probably going to regroup. You know, we'll see if what happens with them in the next couple of seasons. Tyrone, I'm sure, will be back. So, like, what do you think? Could you see this Kerry team now really start to go on and dominate the All Ireland Senior Football Championship scene, or what would be your thought process on it?
I think if they get it right, they can. I really do. I think that it's a good point that was made there about, look, Armagh are getting better, Galway are getting better. But on the flip side, like Monaghan, in my opinion, are getting worse. Donegal are getting worse. Like other teams that were probably at that level where they could be competing for All Irelands. Like Monaghan's peak, in my opinion, that Monaghan team's peak was 2018, that year that they should have reached the All Ireland final and Tyrone beat them in the semi-final. I think that was Monaghan's peak. Then the likes of Donegal, I mean, 3 Ulster titles in a row, and now they haven't won one since 2019. Like, it's important to look at it that, okay, some teams are getting better, yes, but other teams are getting worse. Like the Mayo team now, James Horan stepped away. They're looking a bit, you know, in transition, and whoever comes in is crucial to get that transition right, because like we've seen with Kerry in 2013 to 2016, it's hard to balance these players of the previous team that you had with the next team that you want to have. I mean, Tipperary in the hurling is a perfect example of that. Like they were never quite good enough to beat Limerick, but they could never drop the likes of Brendan Maher, Paddy Maher, Shamie Callanan. So like this Kerry team definitely has the potential to go on and dominate. They really, really do. We've talked about, you know, the crop that they have coming through, the amount of talent that they have coming through. Stephen Akumba, even the likes of a wild card coming back. Like if Mark O'Connor comes back from the AFL, like he is a huge midfielder and he could slot right in and replace David Moran. Like, so if he comes back, that's Kerry's number 8 sorted for the next 5 years, 6 years. So their ability to go on and dominate for me is clear to see. It just is completely reliant on how the other teams build. It's completely reliant on how Dublin rebuild, on how Mayo rebuild, on how if Galway can keep progressing, if Armagh can keep progressing, who comes in and takes over as Donegal boss. Can he get them moving in the right direction? Can Tyrone bounce back? It's all dependent on those teams because Kerry are getting it right. Kerry have got it right. We saw this year how good their defensive system is, how good their backs were this year. Like, they only conceded 1 goal in the championship. Like, that's remarkable. So they've got it right. Now it's up to the other teams to get it right, or Kerry will dominate.
Yeah, absolutely. Shane says David is unbelievable, but I don't think he would be the greatest of all time. No, nobody will ever be better than Gooch, in his opinion. There, yeah, like, it's an interesting point. I mean, look, I think Colm Cooper is obviously, one of the greatest footballers of all time. Make no mistake about that. But like, when you look at Clifford at his age and what he's doing already, and like, in terms of physically as well, I think, like, let's not forget Clifford's a lot taller and physically he's a lot bigger. In my opinion, I think Cooper, like, he was a lot smaller, and he would just make something out of nothing. Like, he was, I'd almost look at it as a bit like Cooper was almost like the Messi of Gaelic football, where he was small and unpredictable, and he didn't know what he was going to do, and he'd so much just natural ability. Like, he didn't really need to really work on his game so much. Not to say that he didn't, I'm sure he did.
But it's a great comparison. It's a great comparison, because when Cooper was 21, he scored that goal in that final against Mayo in 2004, the one where he caught it over his head and ran through the whole defence and stuck it in the net. So, like, it's a good comparison. But I just think in the modern game, I do think physical size is so important. And, like, I feel like if Cooper was in the game now, he'd have like a pit bull, like a Paddy Hampsey or someone like that from every team stuck on him straight away that would just try and wrestle him to bits. Like, so I think if Cooper was in the modern game, don't get me wrong, he would still be one of the best forwards in the game without doubt. I'm not trying to, diminish what he's done. He's amazing. I just think Clifford's size is so important and so underrated. He can shove a player off to get that 1 yard of space. He can make that space when it's not there. So can Cooper. But if Cooper got if he got a Chrissy McCaig or someone like that can just stick on his toe and just proper stay in his face the whole game, Cooper wouldn't be able to shove him off like David Clifford does. So I think it's a great debate. But I actually do think when it's all said and done, I think Clifford will have done more than Cooper has. I think it's a good shout that he might. If Cooper won 4 All-Ireland titles, I think it's in Clifford's ability to win more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it is a very, very good comparison, and it is an interesting debate. Like, I've seen people mentioning, like, Peter Canavan is the greatest of all time. I mean, Diarmuid Connolly is probably one of the best footballers I ever seen live, in my opinion. But yeah, Shane says our mighty fullback deserves a mention. For pity he won't or shouldn't win it, but he deserves a mention. Brilliant yesterday, and has been immense all year. Absolutely. Like, and in general, the Kerry defense, I mean, that's kind of been the big turning point really since Jack O'Connor's obviously come in and obviously, brought in Paddy Talley in as a defensive coach. And, because the thing with this Kerry side all the time was we could see that they had the quality, we could see they had the players, the ability in the likes of Clifford, Sean O'Shea, Killian Spillane, who was breaking through. Paul Gainey's been an excellent marksman, was obviously there the last time Kerry won the All-Ireland as well. So, but it is that defensive sort of system there, like of since Paddy Talley's coming in, like the turnovers in around the half-back line, obviously the work rate of Jason Foley, Tom O'Sullivan's been exceptional. So, like, it really has been that sort of defensive principles that have been put into Kerry that I think have really sort of set the foundations for Kerry to go on and achieve what they have achieved this year.
Yeah, without doubt. They needed, the rough side of the game as well. They needed that solid base of a defense. Like, every team needs a good defense. Every team needs a good backbone massive shout out has to be to Jason Foley, because me personally, I'm willing to throw my hands up and say, after last year's semi-final, I was saying Foley isn't at the races there, fullback. Like, he's there for the taking. And let's be honest, over the last year, he was there last year for the taking, because he was left exposed. And not only in that game against Tyrone, but I distinctly remember Brian Hurley absolutely roasting him for the goal that he scored for Cork in that Munster final. Like, he was exposed time and time again, but by God, the training that he must have done over the off season for his positioning. Like, let's not forget what Damien Comer did to Brendan Rodgers in that All-Ireland semi-final. And going into this game, I was saying, like, will Foley be there thinking, God, like, Brendan Rodgers was probably on for an All-Star, and, Damien Comer just absolutely lit him on fire in Croke Park. But Foley shut him down. Comer didn't get, like, look, checking it here. Yeah, Damien Comer didn't score. Like, that's Galway's talisman. That's Galway's key man. And Jason Foley's just taking him out. I do think the defensive system has absolutely helped him a lot. I think he's not being left as exposed as he was. But I have to say that after the Kerry Club Championship, having seen how good Dylan Casey was for Austin Stacks at fullback, having seen how good Stefan Acumbar was, I openly was saying put Casey at fullback and put Acumbar at centre back and Kerry will be better. But it was the old guard. It was Jason Foley who'd been there the year before. It was Tyg Morley who's been around the block a few years now, who proved they were good enough. They just needed to be managed and trained correctly. And it's a great lesson for any footballer that is, potentially had a bad day at the office, that look, all you need is the right system to come in, the right way of being used in a system, in a team, and you can achieve what Foley has, which is, in my mind, a guaranteed all-star at the heart of the All-Ireland champions defence.
Yeah, Shane says here as well, I wanted him dropped at the start of the year. His improvement is unbelievable. To keep Comer scoreless is unbelievable. And he was also man of the match in the league final by a mile. Brilliant all year. And even in my own preview, I was fairly confident that Comer would get the better of Foley, to be perfectly honest, just because, he was going, as you said there, he was being marked by one of the best fullbacks in the country, and Brendan Rodgers, who'd been absolutely outstanding all year long. And then Comer just turned him inside and out, scored 2-2 from play, was exceptional. So I was thinking, if Rodgers can't deal with Comer, how on earth is Jason Foley going to be able to deal with him? But to be fair, he done an absolutely incredible job. And I think Comer as well only had one shot on goal as well, and that was from way out the field. It was about 40 yards out. It mightn't have even been an effort on goal. I think it might have just been a long ball floated in. So, the work of Jason Foley, and to be fair, I think he's in a potential contender for Footballer of the Year as well. He definitely gets a mention. I'm sure Gavin White mightn't be too far away as well. But that defensive improvement for Kerry has just been so key.
Yeah, because if we're talking realistically about who would they not have done it without, it's very easy to sit there and say, they wouldn't have won the All-Ireland without Clifford. And yeah, without doubt, they wouldn't have won it without Clifford. But David Clifford was also brilliant last year. And they didn't win it last year. David Clifford was fantastic against Tyrone in that semi-final last year. They didn't win that one because at the back they were so vulnerable. Jason Foley upped his game. They win the All-Ireland. It's one of those things where you see, even with Liverpool in the football, Liverpool were brilliant going forward a couple of years in a row. Then the second they signed Van Dijk and Alisson, now they're champions, because I know obviously not this year, but they became champions once they made those two key signings, and once they shored up the back, just like Kerry have done here, then your attack can really be your weapon. But once you have a solid base, it just gives the team so much confidence. But yeah, I can't name an All-Ireland winning team that did not have good defence. The last one that was a bit mad at the back was probably Dublin in 2013, that conceded 3 goals in most games, but still won. But Foley's importance cannot be underestimated. It really can't. And he won't get Footballer of the Year because he's a fullback. But if you're talking about how good a player has been for their position, Foley's right up there. Foley has played that fullback position as good as anyone could. He's marked every forward that he has played on out of the game. He went on Dean Rock for the semi-final. Did Dean Rock touch the ball? Literally, Foley absolutely took him out and absolutely took out Damien Comer. That's a pretty good resume, pretty good CV. And going forward, Kerry should absolutely stick with him a fullback because he's completely shown how good he can be.
Yeah, and I think another man that deserves a lot of credit, in my opinion, who hasn't really actually been, obviously everyone's kind of lauding Clifford and Jason Foley and the Kerry players, but, for me, is Jack O'Connor. I think, to come back into the Kerry side in his first season, win the All-Ireland. He's now won 4 All-Irelands as a manager of this Kerry side, which, or 4 All-Irelands in total, obviously, with Kerry, which is, quite incredible. He won a couple of All-Irelands at minor level and an All-Ireland at under 20 level as well. As a manager, he's done absolutely everything for Kerry, and to come in your first season and win it. And what's even more incredible as well, I seen a tweet from Conor McKenna who was saying that every year Tyrone have won the All-Ireland, the following year Kerry have won the All-Ireland with Jack O'Connor as manager. It's kind of crazy, really. I don't know if Tyrone and Jack O'Connor have worked out some sort of deal or something for this to happen or something. I don't really know, but generally, like Jack O'Connor, like he deserves it. He deserves a lot of credit really for what he's done with Kerry in his first
Yeah,
season as well.
yeah, without doubt, because there would have been a lot of pressure on him to deliver. There would have been a lot of, okay, we've brought you in because you win All Ireland's, get the results. Like they did bring him in for proven results. They brought him in based off his CV. It was a big decision to fire Peter Keane and bring in Jack O'Connor. Like, remember, Jack O'Connor was Kildare manager, and Kildare had done okay, but they hadn't set the world on fire. So to bring back in Jack O'Connor, you know, what is it, 10 years after he left Kerry? Like 10 years after he
Yeah,
left Kerry, like that's
yeah.
2012, Donegal's defeat. I think that was when he left, yeah. Like that's a long time ago. If we're talking, what's happened in the game since, that's a long, long time ago. So to bring him back in with the confidence that he still had what it took to win All Ireland's was a big gamble by Kerry, and it's definitely paid off. Like, because remember when he left, they were off the back of losing to Donegal in the All Ireland quarter final. Like, going out in the quarter final is a disaster for Kerry. They'd lost in the final to Dublin the year previous, and then they'd lost to Down in the All Ireland quarter final in 2010. That's 3 years that aren't good enough in terms of Kerry standards. And then to bring him back in 10 years later when the game has probably evolved a lot. Like, I mean, back in 2012, if a goalkeeper was running up the field to take a shot at the post, what is going on here? But the game has evolved a lot. And to bring O'Connor in with the full confidence that he would be able to be successful was a big gamble by Kerry, but also worked out. Jack O'Connor deserves a huge amount of credit for that, because to come into a team that it does have superstars, David Clifford is, in my mind, like the last one I can think of, a Gaelic footballer that was as marketable as David Clifford would be like a Diarmuid Connolly or a Bernard Brogan type for in a Dublin perspective. But in terms of like how recognizable David Clifford is, and the fact that he doesn't have an Instagram page, the fact that he's kind of staying away from all that, but he's still so recognizable. And if David Clifford was to walk past you in the street, you'd be like, oh, like,
Yeah.
The fact that Jack O'Connor came into that dressing room and got them all working cohesively and grinding. Like, that was the thing about the interview with Sean O'Shea was saying there, we love playing our football, but if we have to grind, then we grind. Like, to have, lads like that are superstars, definitely in their hometown now, they're superstars. To have them grinding, working hard for the team and happy to put the shoulder to the wheel, there's no doubt that Jack O'Connor has inspired that attitude around the team. And for that, he deserves huge, huge, huge credit.
Yeah, Shane says Jack has confirmed himself as Kerry's second best ever manager behind the one and only Mick O'Dwyer. So, yeah, and I would, off the top of my head now, like I'm thinking, yeah, I'd probably agree with that sentiment anyway. When you think about it, he's done it with multiple different teams, like different Kerry teams in different eras. Do you know what I mean? Like, which is very, very impressive. But I suppose, look, we're 30 minutes in, and we obviously haven't mentioned Galway at all. Like, and I think we definitely need to discuss them for a little bit of a period of time, because like they gave as good as a performance as you can. Like, Shane Walsh was absolutely incredible. Like, for me, he was man of the match. Like, I know obviously they always kind of give the man of the match to a player on the winning team, and I think a lot of the reason to partly do that is because they're doing interviews after, and it just makes more sense. It's a lot easier. But like, for me, Shane Walsh was just incredible. Like, that point he kicked from about 40 meters or 30 meters on his right boot, where it just curled in front of the hill. Like, that was exceptional. And probably you could, like, off the top of my head, maybe say point of the year, because it was unbelievable, and he was unplayable, to be honest.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. That shot that he took was like, it reminded me a lot of the shots that Hegarty was taking in the hurling final there, like where the second he hit it, you were like, hardly.
Yeah.
Like, and then it goes straight over, and you're like, he's made that look like, do you know how hard that is? Like, with Tom O'Sullivan biting at your heels to just swing the ball over, like, and he doesn't even like really have a big wind up on his kick. Like, he kicks it as if he's on the 21-yard line, and it flies over. And he kicked one in the second half as well, where he kicked one in the second half where, again, that was another one that we were like, oh, hardly. Like, how is he going to go for that? The one thing I hated was on the commentary, and this is just a personal one. I absolutely hate results-based analysis. I absolutely, like, that free that Walsh took in the second half, where he was out on the sideline and he went for it and he had the distance, but it went wide. And then straight away, like, oh, it wasn't the right idea for Wallace to go for that. And like, he's been pinging them over from like that distance the entire game. And if he scores that, you're like, oh, what a great decision by Wallace to go for that. And like, he was doing things that we didn't think were anyone was really capable of. And he was carrying the fight to Kerry. And he would have known that going into that game, there were a lot of people that were waiting to say, oh, Wallace only does it against Leitrim. He only does it against Sligo. He only does it against, Roscommon. He doesn't do it on the biggest stage of all in Croke Park on All Ireland final days. And by God, he turned up and made sure that nobody was going to be throwing any disrespect on his name, because for me, yeah, right up there as man of the match with David Clifford. I think it was literally Walsh against Clifford in that first half in terms of dragging their team through, because as we mentioned, Comer didn't turn up. He was marked out of it by Foley. Graham O'Sullivan marked Robert Finnerty out of the game. He didn't even have a shot at the posts either. It was Walsh that was leading the way, carrying the fight to Kerry. And for that, I think shoe in for an all-star and absolutely deserves a mention for Footballer of the Year, because what he did on Sunday, there's only a handful of footballers in the country that are able to do that.
Yeah, like he reminds me a lot, to be honest, of Jeremy Connolly. Like that's like he really does remind me, like the way he moves with the ball, and even Connolly was like that as well. Like with Dublin, like when he'd score from like mental angles and score insane points, like down near by the sideline, or like bending them with his right and even hitting them with his left as well. He just looked so calm and relaxed doing it. Like it didn't look like it was much fuss. Do you know what I mean? It was like he'd be out playing with his mates. Do you know that way? Like, and Shane Walsh reminds me a lot of that at times as well, like where it doesn't look like he's putting a lot of effort into it, but obviously clearly he is, but like it's just the way it looks is just very, very good. But yeah, I think he's definitely a contender for Footballer of the Year, make no mistake about that. But where do you think maybe it sort of went wrong for Galway maybe then in that final sort of 15-20 minutes, because they were very, very close to getting the job done. Like they were leading for the majority of the game. Like once Kerry took the lead, that was it. Like, Kerry went on to win it from there. But, like it was there to win at one stage. Like where do you think it went wrong?
Subs bench. I really do. And I wouldn't want to ever single out a single individual coming on. I do think the Galway subs did well, but I think the Kerry subs, they were perfect substitutions to make. Bringing on Adrian Spillane for David Moran. David Moran was starting to gas. Killian Spillane, I think personally, is one of the most underrated clutch players that I've seen. Every time Kerry bring on Killian Spillane, I'm like, but he's 100% going to score when Kerry need him to. He did it against Dublin in that 2019 final. And the one that gets slept on so much is before Mark Keane got that goal for Cork in 2020, Kerry looked like they were about to win because of Killian Spillane. He'd hit over 3 brilliant points when the likes of David Clifford were having a stinker that day. So Spillane is one of the most underrated clutch players we've seen. I knew when he came in, he was going to put over exactly there, like Rory, the difference. Yeah, he got crucial points when they needed them. Adrian Spillane coming in definitely helped around the middle, added a bit more mobility than David Moran was adding. And we spoke about this off air, and it's an interesting one to look at. Like a lot, and it's maybe a controversial one to say, but a lot of people talked about Joyce getting rid of a lot of the lads, or the squad changing a lot from 2018's Connacht title and semi-final appearance, and how there was only 3 lads left in the starting team from that day, and how it was such a good thing that he'd put his own stamp on the team. But I'm looking at that and I'm saying, like, there were a lot of good footballers in that team. There were your Ian Burks, who won an All-Star. There was your Antoine O'Lees. There was your Peter Cooks. There was your Sean Andy O'Calligs. Like, there were Eamon Brannigan. A lot of good footballers in that Galway side. And coming down the home stretch, like, you have to remember, that Galway team in 2018, they beat Kerry quite comfortably in the Super 8s game. They beat them quite comfortably, and they beat them in the Allianz League as well. And coming down the home stretch, I feel like bringing on the likes of a Peter Cook and Eamon Brannigan, lads that have beaten Kerry in the past, like, might have been a little bit of a better option than to bring on a very young lads that didn't necessarily have the most experience of playing in the All-Ireland Championship up until that point. Kerry were bringing on lads that have already played in All-Ireland finals. They've played in crunch games, clutch moments they've clutched up, like I mentioned with Killian Spillane. And Galway were bringing in lads who were very raw compared to an Eamon Brannigan, an Ian Burke, a Barry McHugh. Interesting to look at for me there, because if they had an Ian Burke or a Barry McHugh, they could have whipped Rob Finnerty off straight away and said, look, it's not working. He's getting shut out of the game. Ian Burke will offer something different. Eamon Brannigan, maybe just pure pace, offer something different. But their bench wasn't as strong as Kerry's, and I think that is what eventually led to Galway gassing a little bit, like Paul Conroy having to go off, Killian McDade getting that knock. I just feel like Kerry's strength and depth is what eventually came through.
Yeah, like I think it's a good point that you make. Like, and you know, with Galway, like they've a lot of very, very good footballers in the county. I mean, we've seen Corofin obviously win multiple All-Ireland club titles, and plenty of players obviously play a big part in that as well. Like, and you know, as I was saying to you off air as well, like maybe with the fact that now that the county side got to an All-Ireland final, that might be a bit of a buy-in maybe for a few club players or a few players. And look, maybe they might not get a look in. Maybe it might be like, look, you weren't here when times were tough. You weren't here, you know, like when we were having to build ourselves back up. So why should we let you back in the panel now? But, you know, like, and look, they do have a good couple of young lads coming through. Like Tom O'Callaghan wasn't on the panel. I think maybe he might have picked up an injury or something like that. But he's a good young player that's coming through the ranks, was part of the under-20 team that won the All-Ireland a couple of years ago. So, you know, like there is a lot of room for optimism for Galway. Like, you know, like it's a young enough squad, like Sean Kelly, Matthew Tierney, Jack Lynn, all young lads that have kind of come into the side in the last year or so, getting to an All-Ireland final. Like, as long as they can keep the pieces of the puzzle there in terms of Walsh, Comer, I know those lads are kind of getting on a bit at the same time, but at the same, you know, I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. And they've got a good crop of young lads coming through. So, you know, I don't know if they'll win the All-Ireland next year or the year after, but I do think you'd have to say now that Galway are probably going to be thereabouts over the next couple of seasons. And it's going to take a good team to beat Galway if they do beat them next year or the year after.
I agree. Yeah, I completely agree. I think, look, this year was definitely a bit different in that there were novel pairings in the quarterfinal. Like, if we had said at the start of the year that one of the quarterfinals would be Derry against Clare, you wouldn't have bought that. And like, there were a lot of novel pairings. Armagh getting a lot better, Galway are getting a lot better. But I think next year we could be looking at a situation where Mayo could hire the right guy and be right back in there in the quarterfinals. Donegal could do the same, hire the right guy, be right back in the quarterfinals. Tyrone could come back. Monaghan could have a resurgence there. Whoever comes in to replace Seamus McEnany. There's a lot of teams that could come back, and maybe it would be more of a Shark Tank to get through next year to actually get to an All-Ireland final again. And they could end up on the same side of the draw as Dublin. Like, they really could. And this was a Dublin side that lost to Kerry by a last-minute free when they didn't have Con O'Callaghan, Jack McCaffrey, Paul Mannion. Maybe next year those lads come back and Dublin are 10 times better. So it will be more of a Shark Tank next year. I do think it will be harder to get to the stage that these teams got to. It will be harder for Derry to win Ulster next year. It will be harder for them to get back to the quarterfinal. It will be semi-final. It will be harder for Galway to get to the final next year. But I do think next year they'll be 1 year wiser. They'll be 1 year stronger. Tom O'Callaghan might, come into the side during the league campaign and absolutely smash it and go right in there, a corner forward, and be another outlet, be another threat for Galway. I think they have absolute definite scope for improvement. And with Pádraig Joyce at the helm, they have an ambitious manager. They have someone that when he came into the job, he was saying, All Ireland's, I'm here to win All Ireland titles. So he's not gone. I imagine he's not going to go until they get damn close again, and if not win one. So yeah, I definitely keep an eye on Galway, and I like them. I like the football that they play. I like the forwards that they have. Shane Walsh is one of the best footballers to watch that I've seen in the last 10 years. So yeah, I'm rooting for them to do one. I'm rooting for them to win one. And with Joyce at the helm, they definitely have an ambitious coach that won't stop until they do.
Yeah, Porter says, is there an All-Ireland in this Galway team? I definitely think there is, like especially with the age profile of some of those players coming through. And, when you have a player like Shane Walsh who's doing what he was doing in an All-Ireland final, I think once you kind of keep him fit, I think that will definitely stand to Galway in the next couple of years. But I suppose speaking of teams that are obviously looking to, I suppose, get back to the chasing pack or get back to, I suppose, competing at the highest level of Gaelic football is Meath. And as we've seen today, a very interesting appointment in Colm O'Rourke, who was announced as Meath senior football manager. Certainly an interesting one because he said a couple of weeks ago that he wasn't interested in the job, and he said that, you know, it's too late for him now to be going into inter-county management and that he was too fixed on club football and he was enjoying sort of his management there. But I'm not too sure what's changed between then and now, but here he is, the new Meath senior football manager, and kind of crazy really, because I didn't really think we'd see him go into inter-county football management. I think maybe there was a time period, maybe like 15, 20 years ago, where maybe he could have went in as a manager. But here he is as manager of Meath. What were your thoughts on that?
I like it. I do. I think he's exactly who Meath need. Like McEntee, for whatever reason, obviously there's stuff behind the scenes, but McEntee couldn't keep the same team together year on year. Like me and you mentioned this, every year that Meath came into play against Dublin, they had a new main forward, they had a new top scorer, they had a new, and then the next year that forward would always be gone. Like one year it was Mickey Newman, one year it was Ben Brennan, one year it was Thomas O'Reilly, then it was Jordan Morris. Like they could never keep a sense of continuity. But with O'Rourke there, if he brings in the right guys in that backroom team, I mean, their under-20 management team there a couple of years ago was unbelievable. They had like Bernard Flynn in the backroom team. They had Trevor Giles. So if they can bring in the right backroom team that have worked with these lads, I mean, you're looking, they won the All-Ireland minor title. Footballers like Sean Emanuel and that team looked seriously impressive. They've got a lot of young talent like Shane Walsh, Jordan Morris, Cathal Hickey. Some serious talent in that Meath team. And if they can get it right, they might be onto a winner there with O'Rourke as manager. Because if you're saying, he hasn't really managed inter-county, he managed the international rules team and was successful in that. Ireland won when O'Rourke was the manager. He has experience. I mean, his punditry is pretty good. He spots, a lot of things that I wouldn't spot personally. I think he's pretty damn good. And if he brings in the right lads there around him, I think Meath will be right in there. Because on top of that, the last few years that I've watched Meath play Dublin, I fully have thought Meath do not believe they can beat Dublin. There's something in that team that they really just don't think they can beat Dublin. There is no one on the Meath panel right now who has beaten Dublin, like ever, in league or championship. I think the last time Meath beat Dublin was 2010. Donald Keoghan, I think, came in on 2012, I believe, with Brian Menton. And then apart from that, they're all pretty recently joined the team. So getting these lads in a very similar way that Jim McGuinness did with Donegal, where he ushered in the likes of Michael Murphy, the likes of Carl Lacey, the likes of Paddy McBrearty, that had been successful with minor teams and under 21 teams that Jim McGuinness was manager of. If he can bring them lads in, then they believe they can beat Tyrone because they have done it at minor level. They've done it at under 21 level, and now they got a chip on their shoulder and they want to be the ones to do it at senior level. McGuinness brought them in. If Colm O'Rourke brings through the likes of Sean Emanuel, the likes of Cathal Hickey that have beaten Dublin at minor level, beaten them at under 20 level, and bring them into the senior team at a time when Dublin are actually going through a little bit of a transition and are kind of, hanging on to the last few lads that were part of that All-Ireland winning team, and say, look, we can be the ones that can beat Dublin here. Everyone's writing us off. They bring in the likes of Colm O'Rourke, the likes of, maybe even a Liam Hayes or someone like that into the backroom team that they just never, ever feared playing Dublin. Give them that real chip on the shoulder. It could be the perfect storm.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of them that I'm not sure about at the same time, because he has been so long sort of outside of management, and the fact that he was so adamant that he wasn't going to be manager, it kind of does let me think, like, what's changed, sort of, what's kind of led to that change of heart. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
maybe he saw who was supposed to come in this place, and he was like, no.
I'm not sure what it was, like, or like maybe they're like matching his wages on the Sunday game. I really don't know. Do you know that way? Like, but look, at the same time, as you said there, like, he can be quite controversial on the Sunday game, and I do think a lot of the time in the last few years he's probably you know, like he's gotten a bit carried away at times, but I do think he clearly is an excellent pundit. Like, make no mistake about that.
Maybe the Sunday game pushed him out because he was saying too much.
Yeah.
Maybe they're saying, well, you're gone as well. You think Pat Spillane retiring was a mistake? Go on, out the door with all these.
Yeah, no, like it's an interesting one, all right. Like, and I think the days of O'Rourke, Brawley, Spillane, like I think, you know, like we'll never get that again, you know, like, which is kind of mad when you think about it. But yeah, but at the same time, look, he is a man who knows Meath football inside and out. You know, like he's won, I think, 2 All-Irelands as a player. He actually won 2 county titles with Simonstown a couple of years ago in Meath, which was sort of a big achievement at the time. Like, so look, he has achieved things, and he knows Meath inside and out. He knows the players. He knows the young lads coming through. And, you know, Meath need that bite back, in my opinion. They need a bit of fight into them. They need a bit of, like, you know, like I remember when Dublin were playing Meath back in the mid-2000s, and you didn't like the Meath players, you know what I mean? Like, you hated them in many ways. I mean, hate's a strong word, but in terms of a rivalry aspect, you know, like the likes of your Graham Garrity's, your Joe Sheridans, these lads, like, they were tough players, and, you know, you'd always be in for a battle. Like, that just hasn't been the case with Meath in the last, like, 8-9 years. Like, once Dublin build up a bit of a lead, their heads just go. And we've seen this a lot of the time when Meath have played other sides as well. Like, like technically very, very good footballers, but, you know, it's been that sort of mental aspect and that sort of that bite, I think, that Meath really need back, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I can see the first game that Dublin go to play now against Meath, because remember, Dublin are in the same division as them now in the Allianz League. We're going to be playing them in the league. I feel like if that's in Port Talton, I mean, if you're a fan of a good GAA fist fight, I feel like that is a one to put some money down on. I feel like Meath will be determined to be like, yeah, we're back. And they're going to just go straight over and just punch someone like Brian Howard in the face the second that the game kicks off. So I feel like O'Rourke will fire them up to a level that we haven't seen a Meath team fired up to since they were back in the mid-2000s, when you're right, like the likes of Joe Sheridan, Graham Garrity, like they were hard as nails, and they weren't the slightest bit afraid of Dublin back then. And like Dublin drew at Meath in 07, like they took a replay to beat them. And one thing that Keane Ward spoke on, and if you just, Keane Ward's a great speaker, like he makes great points. He was saying it really frustrated them back then, because teams that would beat Meath, like Wexford, for example, beating Meath in 2008, and then went into that Leinster final against Dublin, folded after about 10 minutes. It was like the other teams in Leinster at the time didn't believe that they could beat Dublin. But Meath and that crop always held on to the belief that they could beat Dublin. And look, 2010 was the last real stand for that crop, the last stand for the likes of Joe Sheridan, the last stand for the likes of Stephen Bray. They beat Dublin out the gate that day in 2010, putting 5 goals past them. And since then, the lads that have come in, 2012, Meath lost to Dublin in that Leinster final. And since then, the lads that have come in have all been young, pretty talented, but it's like they just expected to be beaten out the gate by Dublin every single time. And I personally, and you know, you'd be watching this back in 5 years if Meath go on to start winning Leinster titles and stuff, and say, like, careful what you wish for. I wish for a bit of a rivalry. I really do. Like, I miss a good Dublin Meath match where, like, you would not miss a Dublin Meath game. Going to Croke Park to watch a Dublin Meath game was a classic. And listening to the way my dad talks about the 90s games, and it seemed like it was such a great atmosphere and such a great rivalry there, that there is a mutual respect there between the two teams, but they didn't like each other. And like some of the best games that the GAA has seen, I mean, that 1991 saga between Dublin and Meath, by all accounts, changed GAA. It introduced a load of new people to the sport because it was a national sensation, really. Like, this were 4 replays. So yeah, if for the GAA, it would be great for the GAA if Meath made a bit of a burst and came back. And I do think you make a great point about O'Rourke, and you know, he has been out of the game for a while. But I think if O'Rourke brings in the likes of Bernard Flynn, who have been there with the under-20s, who have been there with these lads, and if Bernard Flynn can kind of escort them through to the senior side and use the chip on the shoulder that they have, and use the winning mentality that they have, and use the attitude that they have of, we beat Dublin every year, what are you talking about, we can't beat Dublin? That could light the fuse under the likes of Brian Menton, that under the likes of Donald Keogan, to get them thinking like, yeah, we can beat Dublin. And that league game could actually be one hell of a game to watch. Early one to put down on the calendar, I think.
Yeah, Gavin O'Reilly says Division 2 could be quite good next year. Absolutely, yeah. Like, let's not forget you've Derry in there as well. Like, like there's a lot of Division 2 is going to be very competitive next year. Make no mistake about that. Peter says here O'Rourke has his work cut out. Don't have the bite. But I think you made an excellent point there. Like, I think it depends on who he brings in, really, sort of. Like, I think that's going to be very, very key. Like, needs to bring in a bit of experience. And even you look at something like what Kerry done, for example, and bringing in Paddy Tally, going with an outside man, like that was quite an unusual appointment in some ways from a Kerry point of view when it happened, because like Paddy Tally, Tyrone, like they, Kerry players and fans would have grown up, like really disliking someone like Paddy Tally, because of what he done to stop Kerry winning All Irelands. But here he is now, a part of the Kerry panel. Like, I think Meath maybe need to do something like that, and start looking around and seeing, maybe who could we bring in here, maybe as a coach, or something like that. Like, I know Stephen Rochford's possibly available, like obviously with Declan Bonner having left Donegal. Could he be a good sort of number 2 to come in alongside O'Rourke, along with Bernard Flynn in the background? Like, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, all right. But I think, as you said there, like, I think we all kind of do want Meath to be, I don't want them to beat Dublin as such, but at the same time, it would be nice to have a rivalry, and it would be nice to, like, have that sort of physical edge and be going to a Dublin and Meath game and thinking this is going to be tough. And, like, I always do think the championship is better when you have more teams, more competitive sides. And I think, given the history of Meath, the third most successful team in All Ireland Senior Football Championship history, I think it would be good to see Colm O'Rourke get a tune out of these lads.
Yeah, no, like, and the GAA would absolutely love that as well. I mean, there's just no way that Meath coming back in and being competitive isn't good for everybody. It's great for the fans. I mean, like, a lot of them, why do you want to look at the attendances? Look at the attendances. Like, they haven't been great in the Leinster Championship over the last 2 years. Dublin Meath games in the 2000s, I know it was a different time. The recession in 2008 hadn't hit yet. So people had more money and, were more expressive with it and would go to Croke Park on the regular. But it had interest. Dublin weren't guaranteed to beat Meath back then. Now they pretty much are. And O'Rourke coming in, he comes in a hardcore man coming from that 1990s Meath team. Like, I wonder, did you see Liam Hayes doing that interview where he spoke about what he would do if he was in the dressing room playing up against this Dublin team? He did it a couple of years ago, and he was like, Fenton, McCarthy, Kieran Kilkenny. And he was like, and basically he was just saying, we just absolutely go out and take them out straight away. Like, just go out and start a fight with them. Like, if he's from that crop that they just did not fear Dublin. They did not have any sort of, put them on a pedestal. They weren't afraid of them. And if he can bring that mentality into this Meath team, combined with the flair that they do have, like, Jordan Morris has the potential to be a top class forward. I mean, his finishes for the goals that he scored over the last couple of seasons have been class, and there's the serious potential there. Jack O'Connor is another one that, like, was on the DCU team. Serious talent there with him. Shane Walsh, exactly the same. Huge talent. Like, they have the players. I really think they have the players. And if they work them into a system that is effective, like, I think they could take a lot out of the Jim McGuinness kind of playbook. I'm not saying that do exactly what Jim McGuinness did, but you look at Donegal's system now compared to Meath's situation. Donegal back in 2010 when Jim McGuinness took over, they had that team in Tyrone that they just could not beat. They did not believe that they could beat. The first thing that McGuinness comes in is psychologically kind of brainwash them to get them to believe that they can beat Tyrone. And then when they beat Tyrone, obviously they went on to win Ulster and win the All-Ireland the next season in 2012. With Meath, the first step for them is to really believe they can beat Dublin and really believe that they can put it up to them and be competitive again. And a win in the league could be massive to do that. That's why I'm genuinely saying that league game has a lot riding on it, because if Dublin go to Port Talton, say, and smash Meath to bits by 20 points, that's a terrible start for this new era, and we could see O'Rourke, leave the position in 1 year. But if Meath beat Dublin in Port Talton and there's a big crowd there and they all are loving beating Dublin, like it could ignite something in these Meath lads that they really believe now that they can beat Dublin. And you know, you never know. Leinster Championship, put it up to them, give them more confidence. I think the GAA would absolutely love it, and attendances would go way up if there was a good old Dublin Meath rivalry there again.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Like, and I suppose it would be ironic, all right, to see Colm O'Rourke have a bit of a defensive side, given the fact that the amount of times he's complained on the Sunday game about defensive sides and all the rest. But look, I definitely think it's something like that could work. And look, obviously, it's all hearsay. Like we don't know how it's gonna pan out, but you know, like you see him with Kildare when they obviously bring, you know, their sort of ex-players in as managers, and you kind of see Kildare have their sort of bite back that they were very much missing, I felt, under Jack O'Connor sort of last year. So it's certainly going to be very very interesting to keep an eye on it. But I suppose, look, we'll go ahead and wrap this up here. Obviously, a lengthy discussion on the Kerry Galway game, and obviously discussing Colm O'Rourke's
John do Brian Cowdy
as Meath senior football manager. Yeah, like I think maybe I might leave discussing Brian Cowdy, to be honest, because I think it's you know, we've kind of all discussed it like a lot sort of in the last week, and I'm also very hungover from yesterday and quite tired. So I think to be honest, I might call it a day there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, well, look, appreciate you jumping on anyway, and yeah, cheers anyone who tuned in. If they could hit the like button and subscribe, it would be very much appreciated. And yeah, cheers, Seamus, for coming on. Much appreciated.
Absolutely no bother. Thanks for having me on again, Aaron.